Oh, hello. I'm R.L. Stine. I write the Goosebumps books. Over the past year and a half, my number one booktuber has been reading through my main Goosebumps catalogue. You find this opening gag repetitive? Wait until you've read my Goosebumps books.
Mr. Stine, you still have an entire Goosebumps book to write from start to finish before your deadline. Thank you.
Prepare yourself for another thrilling movie-length video about my Goosebumps Most Wanted series, including the special editions that I did. Strap in for another terrifying video. What's so scary about that? You're about to find out. Viewer beware, you're in for a scare. Hi everyone, welcome back to How to Train Your Gavin. Grab yourself a hot drink, I have myself a tea, and get ready for what could be another future-length Goosebumps video. If you do not know, I'm currently going through the entire Goosebumps main series, and I am reading and reviewing them in these big epic vlogs, so I do have a playlist down below for my Goosebumps Post-mortem series. It will have all of my Goosebumps videos in there. Goosebumps by R.L. Stine is a series that meant so much to me as a kid. It got me into reading, and I have so many fond memories of getting Goosebumps books throughout the years, and it will always have a special place in my heart. No matter how many times I criticized it as an adult, I still love Goosebumps to my core. So please don't go forward that I do love this series with everything I have. I have never read a lot of the more recent Goosebumps books, so it's a great learning experience doing that. But no matter how many times I criticize the series, I still love it. So yes, that disclaimer out the way. Please enjoy. I have been rating all of the books out of 10, so each of the main Goosebumps series have an average. So far we have the original series at a 5.33 out of 10 average. We have the Series 2000 series with a 5.95 average out of 10. Then we have the Horrorland series with a 3.84 average out of 10. And then the Hall of Horror series with a 3.71 average out of 10. So the Goosebumps series has been on a bit of a decline in my general opinions on the series as a whole. For context, I did read the Goosebumps and the Series 2000 books as a kid, but it was the first time I ever read the Horrorland and the Hall of Horror series, and I did that last September. It was a very hectic month, and I still managed to read 5 Goosebumps books a day. Not that I think I'm going to do that again in this video, but at least I know I can do that. And fortunately, the series I'm reading in this video is a lot shorter than all of the others so far. And the Goosebumps series I'm tackling in this video is the Most Wanted series. Yes, I've never read these books before. There is going to be no nostalgia attached whatsoever, but it also pains my heart that I have a mixture of American and UK editions of the Most Wanted series. So they don't all match or anything like that, and it kind of hurts. Not just kind of, actually, it hurts a lot. The Most Wanted series consists of 15 books. So we do have one standalone book. Why it's a standalone, I actually am not really sure. We have 10 main series books, and then we have 4 special edition books. Again, I'm not sure why they've been split up that way, but I'm really excited to find out. I always have high hopes going into the Goosebumps series. Usually they're dashed pretty quickly, but I'm a very optimistic guy, and I do think I'll at least enjoy some of them. Usually there's a hidden gem in the series that I've been reading. If there's only 1 or 2 I end up loving, I don't mind. It'll be worth it. This series was published between 2012 and 2016, so it is the 11-year anniversary this year of the series starting. So that is rather scary, not gonna lie. Probably the scariest thing about the Goosebumps series is how much time has passed since they've been coming out. Wow. My preferences in Goosebumps is I prefer the scarier books. I prefer when R.L. Stine goes all out on the fear, but usually he does lean into comedy a lot more, and ridiculousness and slapstick humor and all of this. So hopefully there are some scary books in this series. I think the recurring theme of the Most Wanted series and what the entire series is kind of about is that each book introduces a villain, or each book is more central around a villain. I mean, I think we still have our usual child protagonists, but I think the main part of the books are that we have these villains who are the most wanted villains in Goosebumps. I hope. If not, I will correct myself later on. But anyway, a little rundown of the Goosebumps Most Wanted series then. We do have the 2012 standalone, which is Goosebumps Wanted: The Haunted Mask. This came out first, and it's what started the Most Wanted series. So we go into Planet of the Lone Gnomes, Son of Slappy, How I Met My Monster, Frankenstein's Dog, Dr. Maniac Will See You Now, Creature Teacher: The Final Exam, A Nightmare on Clown Street, Night of the Puppet People, Here Comes the Shaggedy, The Lizard of Oz, which I love that name actually. I really do love that name. Zombie Halloween, The 12 Screams of Christmas, Trick or Trap, and finally The Haunter. So there we have it. Those are the 15 Goosebumps Most Wanted books I will be reading in this video. If I really wanted to, I could probably read these in 3 days. If I wanted to. I don't think I do though. I have lots on. I will have timestamps down below for each of the books, so when I talk about each book, I will give you a whole summary of the book, what I thought of the book, what I loved about it, what I hated about it, all of the good stuff. So you can use the timestamps down below if you want to skip to a certain book, but also I will rank all of the books from worst to best at the very end of the video. And also reveal the series average for the Most Wanted series after I've rated all 15 books out of 10. And this is all my personal opinion. Honestly, feel free to agree or disagree in the comments down below, but please be respectful that these are just my opinions and it's very subjective. You can absolutely disagree with me, that's absolutely fine, just keep it respectful. And if you don't mind, please do like this video if you enjoy it and subscribe if you haven't already. Okay, I feel like that's enough stalling. Let's read Goosebumps Most Wanted. I should probably explain my ratings for the Goosebumps books actually. I'm using the same system I've used in all of my previous Goosebumps books videos, and if the camera's shaking it's because my cat is literally on the desk shaking everything. So I rate the Goosebumps books out of 10 using the Corpile system, which was created by my friend Jay at Book Roast. I will leave a link to the video explaining everything down below. But essentially I do give 7 areas of a Goosebumps book a rating out of 10. And those areas are characters, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, logic, and enjoyment. And then I use the average to give an overall rating. So that's what I've been pretty much doing since the beginning to give me a really accurate, well, as accurate as possible, a rating on these books. So that is what I'll be doing. So I have finished the first 3 books. I read them during some reading sprints. So let me tell you about them. Okay, so this definitely feels like a Halloween special. I think, you know, it's longer. It's about 100 pages longer than a usual Goosebumps book. It's split into pretty much 4 parts. We have the first part, which is set 40 years before. We have the second and third part, which are happening in the present day during Halloween, that tie together. And then we have a sort of epilogue chapter. So what do I think about the first Goosebumps Most Wanted book? Well, official first Most Wanted book. I loved it. I thought it was great. I mean, love is a bit of a strong word, and I do have some issues with this. I have issues with every Goosebumps book, okay? It's just a given at this point. But just know I'm trying, okay? I'm trying. I love Goosebumps with everything I have, so I'm trying. But honestly, the start of this book, like the first part of this book, was like the most graphic, I think, the most visceral, the most disgusting start of a Goosebumps book, and I appreciated the hell out of that because, as I say, my favourite thing in a Goosebumps book is genuine scares, actual scary things happening and atmosphere and stuff like that, and the start of this book had it. It really did. So as I said, we have the 4 parts. Part 1 is called The Haunted Mask, and yeah, it's set 40 years before. We have someone called William, and he is somebody who makes masks for children, or at least he like sells them. And then one day his brother comes and visits him, and he has a case full of masks, but these are these really ugly, awful masks. And William wants nothing to do with them. He says they're evil, he tells them to get out. But William's brother, worst brother ever, decides to force a mask on him. And as we've seen in the previous 3 Haunted Mask books, when a mask is on, it's really hard to get it off. So as soon as the mask was on, I was like, hey, in trouble. William's brother Randolph, he is called, is saying that these are the faces no one wanted. Too ugly, too sick, too twisted, no one wanted them. No one wanted to see them. They are the unwanted faces of the world. He really wants his brother to buy them. And then, because he won't buy them, Randolph yet forces it on him, claims he's doomed him. Like, why? As a brother, why would you do that? That's just awful. That's just horrible. But the really gross thing that happens at the start of this is that as William is taking it off, his brother's fled. The other masks have like vanished. They've left as well. He's struggling to get it off, and he does get it off, but he kind of tears his face off with it. I've torn my face off with the mask. And half the time, R.L. Stine backtracks and is like, oh, I didn't really take off my face. That was just like an over-exaggeration. But no, we have chunks of skin clung to the mask, blood poured all around him. Oh my god. There's in fact like a full chapter of him trying to get this mask off. And it's so visceral. It's really hard to read because it's actually rather descriptive and atmospheric. And I was like, R.L. Stine? R.L. Stine, like, this is what I really want in Goosebumps. These are the kind of stories that I really want in Goosebumps. So I was like, oh, amazing. But then he also just dies from his wounds too. He claims that he will always make sure that nobody else ever gets this haunted mask and will never wear it. So he's going to guard it for, well, he's going to die. He leaves his dog Hansel. He's like, someone will look after you. I'm gonna die, but I'm gonna make sure nobody else gets this haunted mask. Yeah, he dies. He goes into a closet and dies after putting it in a trunk. There are plot holes that come up from stuff, which I will get into too. But just straight away, 5 out of 5 for just that opening alone. Unfortunately, part 2 and 3 aren't as strong. Part 2, it goes into the classic haunted mask scenario. We have a young girl called Luan. She also has a friend called Devin. Devin has to work on his dad's pumpkin farm during Halloween, whereas Luan is having to go to this party that Polly's holding with some other friends. And at this party at Polly's, they go upstairs and she finds the trunk. Well, in fact, actually, she also opens a closet door and the ghost of that man is there. And the urban legend about this man, William from the start, is that nobody ever saw him after that. Nobody found him. Even though he was only in that closet, he closed the door when he died there. And yet nobody ever found him in this closet. And 40 years later, we have Luan open this closet and there he is. And also, like, Polly's mum lives there, and like it's a normal room. It's just like people have been there, and like obviously people have moved in like over the past 40 years and stuff. It's just like nobody found his body, really. I mean, saying that though, I think it's just his ghost that comes out of it. So his body must have been moved, or his body must have just disappeared by magic, maybe. But I found that odd anyway. It wasn't really explained well. But Luan, yep, she has the mask on, but then she can't get it off, so she starts acting angry because that's what the mask does, and she goes on a bit of a rampage. And then part 1 ends, and it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger because she's causing chaos, and then it goes into part 2. I found that so jarring. I wasn't the biggest fan that we just had this whole haunted mask bit to then go into this whole other storyline with Devin, who is on his pumpkin farm. He is seeing these pumpkin things happening. He thinks some pumpkins are alive. However, nothing outwardly scary actually happens during his part. In fact, nothing to suggest that pumpkins are alive happens during that time. Like, every single time he's like, oh, I saw a vine move, or I saw a pumpkin, it's explained straight away. For example, and like this is again like why I really hate Goosebumps half the time, is when we instantly get told that what we just saw is wrong. We have a huge dream sequence, which again is so infuriating half the time, especially when R.L. Stine presents them as actual things happening, and then afterwards, oh, it was just a dream. It was just a dream. But say at the end of chapter 6, a boy in jeans and a white t-shirt and a big round pumpkin on his shoulders instead of a head. And then, in the next chapter, the start of the next chapter, but then the pumpkin began to slide down. I realised the boy was holding it in both hands, holding it in front of his face. So, like, he doesn't actually have a pumpkin head. The main character said that, which I totally get as well, because these characters, they're children, they have overactive imaginations, but they do it all the time, which really does distract from actual tension and actual scares, when we know it's most likely 9 times out of 10 gonna be somebody's imagination, or a trick of the light, or a dream. It takes away every single piece of suspense that you might have. I'm just not a fan of that. Which is why I love the first part of this so much, because I was expecting it to be a whole gotcha moment, but there wasn't. The man actually dies and rips his face off while taking the mask off. Oh my god. We meet someone called Hayward during Devin's section, and Hayward, he's fine. He's just a normal lad, until we find out that he's been dead for a long time. And he tells Devin about this grave master person. From inside a pumpkin, he can shift to another shape, another body. He can be a human or an animal. And then it turns out that all of this hey means nothing, because Hayward's mum is the one who turns out to be the grave master. And I guess it is just a thing, isn't it, to just automatically say hey whenever there's like a kind of villain. You just like automatically do that, I guess. But at the same time, I'm just like, R.L. Stine, did you actually write this plot twist out of your arse, or did you actually have it planned? I don't know. There are some scenes with Hayward that's actually kind of a little bit scary. Like Hayward says, it doesn't hurt, he said in a whisper. Doesn't hurt? What doesn't hurt? I cried. It doesn't hurt to die, Devin. You'll see. That is twisted. That is rather scary. Mrs. Barnes, Hayward's mum, turns out to be the grave master. They're trying to, I guess, kill Devin so that Hayward can have a friend. I mean, I'm sure we've had stories similar to that. We've had a ghost want a main character to die so that they can have company. We've had that a few times in Goosebumps. Was the Curse of Camp Coal Lake one of them? Honestly, I'm trying to keep all of my Goosebumps books in line, but when half of them are repeats, it can get kind of hazy. Do I need to reread all of Goosebumps again? Absolutely not. And by this point as well, I was like, I'm not really getting this book. I'm really starting to not like it as much because of the whole Devin part. I genuinely thought it was like dragging it down. And then finally Luan with a haunted mask, like she's trying to do an act of kindness. and she ends up coming across Devin. She saves Devin, and so inadvertently saves herself too. So the two storylines do connect, but I feel like the Devin part was like so overtly long. It was around about 90 pages, whereas Luann's was a lot more condensed. And considering this is more the Haunted Mask, it really didn't feel a whole lot like a genuine Haunted Mask book. For most of it, because of Devin's part, it really does drag it down a bit. But it was very, very good. It's actually like a really good start to the Goosebumps Most Wanted series. So in terms of what I'm rating this book, it came out at a 6.14 out of 10, which actually beats 24 of the 25 Horrorland books, which is insane. There was only one Goosebumps Horrorland and Hall of Horrors book that came above this one, and that was Creep from the Deep, I believe. So it's starting off pretty strong, and I really do like the vibe of Halloween too that's in the background of this. It's not too focused on, but I liked it anyway. And it was honestly a solid start. 6.14, I would say that's like a 3.5 out of 5. And then we come crashing straight back down right after that with Planet of the Goddamn Lawn Gnomes. I mean, considering this book has Planet in the title, you can guess almost what happens by the end of this. But we have Jay, and he lives with his family, and he is noticing that there are these lawn gnomes around, and you can't go out at night because the night belongs to the lawn gnomes kind of thing. And honestly, that does sound pretty scary. But considering the lawn gnomes barely really appear in this, and then at the end, they're not really actual villains. Jay, straight away, is not really a likable character. He wants to abuse his mean old neighbor. And when I say abuse, it's probably like a really strong word. But he puts a ladder outside of the old man's house to make it look like someone broke in. Which honestly is an old man. He could have a heart attack from the smallest of things, surely. He does sort of get caught by two lawn gnomes that are watching him. And he thinks they're actual, genuine, real people. So I don't really know like how big these lawn gnomes are if he's thinking they actually look like people. I'm not 100% sure about this. I feel like they are supposed to be human-sized lawn gnomes, but that kind of defeats the purpose of gnomes in general, right? Because gnomes are supposed to be small, and lawn gnomes in a garden, why would you want human-sized lawn gnomes in your garden? That isn't decoration, surely. But he mistakes them for actual people, and he does get caught by the old man, and he does get in trouble. But this book is so dumb, and I hated it. Jay loves mixing chemicals and things, and he has a chemical set in his room. He mixes acid and stuff, and he has a sister called Kayla, who just walks in on him doing all of these things, and just like, what you doing? You need to stop being so reckless and stuff like that. And then, we have like two twists, and both of them are stupid. So we find out that Jay used to live in a different neighborhood with his family. With his chemistry set, he burned down the house where they lived by accident. Okay, there is a twist that comes up that kind of retcons that. Maybe, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I don't know, there's 3 twists. Is there 3 twists? No, there's 2 twists. It might get retconned. I genuinely don't know because the ending is so ambiguous. But yeah, he burned down his previous family home. They ended up having to move. And yet he still has a chemistry set. Like he said, everything got lost in that fire. And when it got burned down, and here he is with a chemistry set. He's a child. He would not have bought that himself, surely. And even so, he's just doing this in his bedroom. His parents would have seen this at some point. Surely. Especially if Kayla can walk in and out whenever she wants. Oh, but plot twist, Kayla's actually an imaginary friend. He doesn't actually have a sister. Okay, whatever. I would have preferred it if she had have actually been his sister, but she died in the fire and it was like his fault. Like, wouldn't that have been so insane? And it would have followed on from the start of this book being so, oh my god, for Goosebumps. But you don't get that. Instead, we have like some kind of robot thing going on here because Jay's dog accidentally causes an accident, and the man who has this accident is going malfunction, malfunction, malfunction. Other people say malfunction, malfunction, malfunction. Even the lawn gnomes are saying like malfunction, malfunction, and stuff like that. So Jay and his friend Elliot go out after dark when they're not supposed to, and they get in trouble with the lawn gnomes. His friend Elliot turns out to be a robot. His arm comes off. The lawn gnomes are trying to put them in the quagmire, I think they called it. And then his parents come, just randomly they come to give you all of the context you need. And his dad says to Jay, oh, we couldn't get your programming to work. The gnomes had the idea to scare you in order to save you so that you will remember that you're actually on the planet of the lawn gnomes and I guess you're a robot thing. So that makes the lawn gnomes good guys, right? That makes them good people because if they're trying to get Jay to remember his previous life, and it apparently he does, apparently his name is actually Pulmar, we live on Pelovia, planet of the lawn gnomes. Everyone cheered again. The lawn gnomes jumped up and down and tossed their red caps in the air. McClatchy pumped his fist. So what, everyone's trying to get him to remember that he is on the planet of the lawn gnomes. So like he lost his memory randomly. All of a sudden you started telling people your name was Jay and you said you came from a strange planet we never heard of. It was called Earth. Like that kind of almost reminds me a little bit of like the end of Welcome to Camp Nightmare. But also the fact that we have, I'm sure, was it a Shocker on Shock Street or something as well, where we have this kind of like main character is actually like a robot sort of twist. It's almost like a bit of an amalgamation of those two together. So like the lawn gnomes were good all along. They're not villains. Like what? Isn't this supposed to be Goosebumps Most Wanted? And even, right, okay, so I haven't even mentioned this, but at the start of each of the book, it has R.L. Stine welcoming you into the Goosebumps office. And he's showing you these wanted posters of the different villains from the Goosebumps series. Here come the most wanted bad guys starring in the most wanted Goosebumps books. Let's start off with these grinning, glowing-eyed lawn gnomes. They were helping the main character to remember that he's a robot. So they're not actually bad, what? And we're on the planet of the lawn gnomes, which it's just like a normal house place. It's like they've never even heard of Earth. Are you kidding me? How is this planet looking exactly like Earth without them knowing about Earth? It doesn't make bloody sense. There's definitely life out in the universe. We're not the only people out here, of course. But like, how have we got this other place looking exactly like bloody Earth? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But then we have another twist ending where the dog at the end runs away and then starts speaking to Jay and saying, we have to get out of here, Jay. We have to find a way back to Earth. And then he's like, what, you speak? And Mr. Phineas is like, no time to explain. We have to get moving. We have to go back home. Come on, Jay. Who are you going to believe? Them or your dog? So it's like, and that's how it ends. I'm just like, what? Does that mean that he's been kidnapped and taken to like the planet of the lawn gnomes? Like what? Like sometimes I do like an open ending because it can be a good cliffhanger, but just like this whole book was so dumb. It was supposed to be about the lawn gnomes. It was supposed to highlight them as some most wanted bad guys. So I guess if they are then, you know, kidnapping children from Earth and making them believe that they're part of this planet is a sinister thing, but none of that's explored. It's literally just a throwaway line at the very end of the book, which happens a lot of the time. A lot of the times the concept is far better than the actual execution. And just nothing bloody happened in this book. It was so dumb. It was so dumb. I really didn't like it. And I was so disappointed because the first book was so bloody good. So this book I'm giving a 2.86 out of 10. It was just so bloody dumb. It was so dumb. And it probably deserves to be lower, not gonna lie. But it is what it is. There was definitely a moment during this. I think I got halfway through and I was like, well, are we going to get the same story that we've always had with the Night of the Living Dummy book? But then it started to surprise me. And I actually ended up liking this book. Which I feel like I have to preface when I talk about these books now, because I don't want you guys thinking I'm just overtly negative about Goosebumps all the time, because I'm really not. Like, yes, I'm frustrated with so many of the Goosebumps books, but I love R.L. Stine, I love Goosebumps, okay? But I have my problems, I have my issues. But I do need to preface this by saying I like this book, I do. And I actually gave it a 6.00 out of 10. Like, that's how much I actually kind of liked it. It was much better than both of the Live and Dummy books from the Horrorland series, in my opinion. And I just appreciate the fact that we had something a little bit different and a little bit new with this one. Even though, yes, some of it is a bit of a copy and paste from other Living Dummy books. Let me start again. Let me tell you what this book is actually about first. So in this one, we follow Jackson and Rachel, their brother and sister, and Jackson actually is like a really nice guy. Like he is genuinely such a good person. He helps people and he's not somebody who does a lot of tricks and does the whole gotcha thing like pretty much every other main character, so that was a refreshing change too. His sister Rachel is very jealous of him and doesn't like him because he's a goody two-shoes, and it works so well with the main character in Slappy, because Slappy is somebody who causes so much mischief and pins it on the main character so that they look bad. And I really actually enjoyed the fact that we had Jackson, who is a good person and people know him to be a good person, be like really twisted by Slappy and like having these like circumstances happen, and people not believe that Jackson was doing it to begin with because they trusted him implicitly, and breaking that down and the kind of reactions from other people when they realize what Jackson is doing is like so good actually. Like I really enjoyed that. So firstly we have Jackson and his sister going to their grandparents' house, no, the grandfather, just their grandfather, and his sort of like butler person. Can't remember his name, but he was quite creepy. He was given all these warnings. And Jackson and Rachel, while they're at their grandfather's, they come across Slappy. Although Jackson's grandfather thinks that that is actually the son of Slappy, not actual Slappy. He says Slappy's been destroyed, which I'm pretty sure he has been a couple of times at this point. He says Slappy's been destroyed. This is just a copy. This is just called like the son of Slappy. So if you say the magic words, he will not come to life. Don't believe a word. So Jackson goes home and he opens up a suitcase and the son of Slappy's in there. He's like, oh my god, how did this get in there? Things happen. Rachel is the one who says the magic words and you have to shake your head at that. And I was like, Rachel, you're so dumb. But hang on, there is something that happens at the end that kind of redeems this part a little bit. Because at the time I was like, Rachel, why would you do that? You silly thing. But no, Slappy does end up coming to life. But what I loved, right, because what usually happens in a living dummy book is that we have the main character being blamed for things that Slappy's actually done. But in this one, we flip it on its head a bit and we have Jackson literally become the son of Slappy. He becomes the ventriloquist dummy, like metaphorically. He doesn't actually physically turn into one. And it actually does turn out to be the genuine Slappy, not the son of Slappy. Like, he is the original. Slappy, he's able to like hypnotize Jackson with like this chirping sound to make him do the, you know, the awful things that Slappy would usually do himself. And like, it would just always be blamed on the main character. And I honestly love that. I love that because it was different. And it had Jackson actually laughing evilly. It had him doing things like destroying artwork and stealing history tests, like really like silly childish stuff, but like this is a middle grade series, so I can't fault it too much for the silly things I ends up doing. But like, it was just so good, the fact that it was flipped on its head and the main character was becoming like the ventriloquist dummy. Like, he was the one who was doing the things and not being blamed for it because he was actually doing it. And so I love that. One thing I do hate though is Slappy's humour. I genuinely do not find Slappy funny. And the amount of times that Slappy would like make Jackson do the insults, you know, the insults are not funny whatsoever. We slip into fat phobia. We always do when it comes to Slappy. The Goosebumps series has been good at staying away from being fat phobic and things. Like, since the first original series, I thought the fat phobia in the original series was really bad. But then it kind of got phased out as the series has gone on. And so I'm really appreciative of R.L. Stine moving away from those things. And I know what you're thinking as well. Slappy's a villain. You know, he says evil things. But like, every single living dummy book we've had with Slappy, whenever he does these insults, they're honestly the most cringiest and most awful of insults that they're just stupid. Like, they're just really stupid insults. They're just always about someone's looks and appearance. And they're just not funny. There is a way to be evil and say like really witty, funny things about people if you want to insult them. It can happen. But Slappy only ever comments on people's appearances and usually uses fat phobia to do that. And it's not funny. It's genuinely not funny in the slightest. When Slappy actually gives his stand-up performances, and another thing I really didn't like as well is how we always end up having to, well, actually, there's two options. We either have a birthday party where the main character performs with Slappy, or we have a school performance or like a school talent show or some kind of school show where the main character performs with Slappy. There's always some kind of stage show with Slappy every single time. And I know he's saying like a ventriloquist dummy, you know, he's supposed to be part of an act, but every single living dummy book has been the same with that. And we have the whole talent show happening. And Jackson is trying to not let Slappy affect him, and yet he still decides to, like, he's been grounded, he still decides to take Slappy to this talent show, and he's like, oh, you know, I have this thing where Slappy's not going to affect me because I got rid of, like, this chirping chickens or whatever app from my phone, because Jackson thought that that's what Slappy was using to hypnotize him, but it wasn't. I mean, it kind of was, I guess. It wasn't really explained very well, but anyway, I digress. He still ends up going to this talent show with Slappy, the person who's causing him so much grief and so much trouble, getting him into so much trouble, and he still does it anyway. Like, he still takes him to the talent show. He knows what's going to happen. Like, even though he says, I have a plan to stop you, it's like, why would you even risk it? Why would you even risk it? He's making your life hell. Why would you take him onto a stage and do that in front of everyone? It just beggars belief. I know he's a child, but children can be smart, okay? And sometimes he had his smart moments, but that was just a complete, absolute out of character moment, I think, that made the ending just so unbelievable. R.L. Stine just wanted a performance to happen again, and I don't know why, but he just wanted that to happen, so he forced that narrative and he forced that character decision. So, like, it really stumbled at that point. It really wasn't that great at that point. I was like, oh, I was really enjoying this up until, like, we get into the whole tropes again of Slappy being fatphobic and criticizing people's appearances and not being funny, just being cringy, and the whole performance angle of it. And then we finally get to the end, and I think it redeemed itself a little bit. And I did quite like the ending. So, you know, Jackson, I think has it been months? Or it's been weeks maybe. Okay, yeah, it's been a few weeks. And he overhears his sister Rachel talking to Slappy, and it was like her plan all along because she's always been jealous of her brother. And I believe we might have had a similar story in another book, but I kind of don't mind reusing this because I thought the way that it was presented and the way that Rachel was kind of almost like a background character, like she would make comments every now and then, but like the focus wasn't ever really on her, and she always wanted to get her brother in trouble. The fact that she said the magic words as well makes a whole lot of sense too, if she purposefully got Jackson in trouble. And she was like working with Slappy, like she was being evil with Slappy, trying to get Jackson in trouble, and Slappy was eating that up as well. Like, that was a good twist ending. Not exactly original, because I'm sure it has happened before, but I really enjoyed the way it happened in this. So I'm going to have to give it props for that. If I'm looking at my series ratings as well, when I'm looking at the previous Night of the Living Dummy books, this one, yeah, it's definitely way better than Slappy New Year. I gave Slappy New Year 2.86 out of 10. And Revenge of the Living Dummy got 5.29 out of 10. It's up there, it's up there. It's better than Night of the Living Dummy 3 as well, in my opinion. It's a good one, it's a good one. I liked the flipping of the main character and them being hypnotized and controlled to do the things rather than the dummy doing it and pinning it on him. You've heard me talk about this already, I probably talked about it too much. But it was a really good one, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that we had something a little bit different in the Living Dummy series. So firstly, How I Met My Monster. Now, I do love the title. I do love a good pun, and I love a lot of the Goosebumps Most Wanted titles. I think they're really cool. Honestly, the titles of the book and the covers of the books are always so much better than the actual contents of the book. And I've been watching a few Goosebumps Most Wanted ranking videos just so that I can get a sense of the books that people love the most from the series. And I will leave a few of the ranking videos down in the description box if you want to check those out. I think the general census for the Goosebumps Most Wanted series in general is that it's probably the weakest Goosebumps series up to this point, which, considering how much I didn't like Horrorland and it has a really low rating average wise, like, that doesn't bode well, because we did start off really strong. We had 2 books get over a 6 out of 10, and this one seemed to be rather mid to a little bit high on people's rankings. So I was a little bit confused when I read this, and I really didn't like it all that much. In fact, barely anything really happened. In this one, we follow Noah, who is constantly having dreams and nightmares about a monster chasing him, and he's getting really severely bullied, and I'm a little bit sick of the same character archetypes that we've been getting since the very beginning. One thing I think is a problem with R.L. Stine's characters in the present day is that he's still writing characters that should stay in the 90s rather than modern day characters, because this is a modern day world. We are modern day readers now. The characters are exactly the same as they were 30 years ago. So I feel like that's like one of the biggest issues with R.L. Stine, is that he isn't growing as a writer, which is such a shame because, again, I love R.L. Stine so much and I love Goosebumps. But it was really evident with this one and the next one just how much he isn't willing to change as a writer. We have some sparks of ingenuity in some of his books, don't get me wrong, like the first book and Son of Slappy. I think there were some moments of actual originality, but it's never meant to last. And it's confusing as well because the Goosebumps books were churned out one a month, like back in the 90s essentially, and he has had more time to write and develop these books. And I'm going to tell you right now, in the next book, Frankenstein's Dog, there is genuine evidence that R.L. Stine doesn't plan his books. He writes as he goes. There's genuine evidence of this. I will talk about it in a minute. But How I Met My Monster really felt a little bit like Girl Who Cried Monster from the original series too, because Noah starts seeing a monster, and like the monster's never really like well described or anything. It just seems to be like a generic hairy monster, which, you know, we've had many a time in the Goosebumps series. And nothing really stands out about this monster, except that it's eating gerbils. And I can't remember what the original monster ate in the Girl Who Cried monster. I think it was turtles or something, I don't know. But yeah, we've just kind of changed what the monster eats. Oh, sorry, I forgot what I was doing because subscription box, I finally got to the top of the wait list and I've been waiting like 2 years. 2 years to be on this wait list. So, sorry, I had to do that. I can't even remember what I was talking about now. So we have a lot of things to do with dreams, which is one of my least favourite story lines, story tropes. And it honestly, even just from the first, at least he tells you this time, it's like, yes, I know I'm dreaming. I've had this dream before. So I just knew from that very beginning that this was not going to be a story for me. And then we have the mother. This is just going to be me being really nitpicky here because, again, I can't stand any fat phobia in Goosebumps. And again, when I call out fat phobia, I'm not calling you guys fat phobic. I'm not calling Laurel Stine fat phobic. I'm just saying there's fat phobic elements, okay? Anyway, we have Noah saying, why do I have to have non-fat milk? And then his mum says, because you're a chub. And you can tell he's really distraught by his own mum calling him that. And he says, I'm not a chub. I stamped my spoon on the tabletop. I'm not even the biggest kid in my class, not even close. Why do you always have to say I'm a chub? And then she says, sorry, she said, look, don't take it out on me, okay? You're upset because of the dream. You've literally just called him fat. And he says that she calls him that all the time. So this is a mother that continues to fat shame her son. It obviously distresses him. I saw my spoon on the tabletop. He's clearly upset at what you've just called him. Which she's probably called him that many a time before. So why are the parents awful in Goosebumps? Seriously, like this could do with its own video. The awful parents in Goosebumps. Because 9 times out of 10, they're awful. And I don't let the fat phobia or like any kind of like bad character developments or interactions affect my overall enjoyment of a book. Like I try and keep it separate because I know if I let it affect the rating, 9 times out of 10 the Goosebumps books won't even get that many high ratings. But even if we removed the fat phobia from the mother, it's still a really poor book. We have the bully really going after Noah and making him feel like crap. Not even just the parents, but just the teachers as well are awful. So Coach Waller, well, first it looks like Noah's about to drown and then he finally gets out and he's like shaking. The coach and everyone's watching and they're like kind of mortified at what just happened. And Coach Waller came rumbling toward me. Bean, what was that all about? He demanded. Before I could answer, Holland came up behind me. He grabbed the sides of my swim trunks in both hands and took them down to my ankles. So, like, he's just being embarrassed by this school bully right in front of everyone. And then so we have the coach there who you would think would stop this bullying from happening. But then in the next page it's explained when Monroe asks Noah if he got punished, he says, did the coach punish Holland? No, Waller had his back turned. He didn't say Holland do it. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, R.L. Stine? We literally just had, like, literally, it's this little bit here. Coach Waller came rumbling toward me. Bean, what was that all about? He demanded. Before I could answer, Holland came up behind me. He grabbed the sides of my swim trunks. So he's looking at him. Coach Waller's just asked him a question, and as he's asked the question, that's when he gets his trunks pulled down. So how does the coach have his back turned? It doesn't make sense. This is an example of really poor writing because it's trying to make it look like the bullies get no repercussions from the adults for anything. And this is just like one of the many poor examples of teachers just letting bullying happen in the Goosebumps series. It's very triggering. Monroe is the person who's just moved into this apartment complex, Sternum House. And if you rearrange the letters of Sternum, it spells monster. Like, how bloody original. So the twist of the book is that Noah has a best friend called Lisa, who isn't a very good friend, in all honesty. Neither is Monroe. Like, they're just terrible characters. Monroe and Lisa, who are Noah's best friends, they turn out to be the monsters. And they have been trying to scare the monster out of Noah because, yeah, apparently Noah is a monster too, and he just doesn't know it yet. I'm just like, this is another case of where the main character doesn't really know who he is, which we got in The Planet of the Lone Gnomes. There's a book where it turns out that the main characters are dogs. That whole thing is a thing in itself, a whole trope in itself. But yeah, it turns out Noah's been a monster all along. And actually it's the same in The Girl Who Cried Monster because it turns out the main character and her family are also monsters. So I'm just like, this is literally a copy and paste. Just change it up a little bit with character names and we've got the same story. And I'm sure there was a werewolf story as well. Where, was it the Werewolf of Fever Swamp? Werewolf Skin? There was one where, did he like turn his, this is honestly like, my mind with Goosebumps is just fuzzy everywhere. But there's like one where he turns into a werewolf and he gets his dad turned into a werewolf as well. I'm pretty sure he, at the very end of the book, he like runs through the forest and he's like happy, he's like running with his dog and like he's a wolf and he's like happy. And it's like the exact same ending here as well. Because he's running through the forest with his friends Howling at the clear blue sky, cool wind felt so nice against my fur. R.L. Stine's forgetting that he's already wrote these things. He's already wrote it all. So other than the main character seeing monsters, and half the time they were dreams or like he didn't actually see them, nothing happened. Nothing happened. So I gave this one a 3.86 out of 10. And honestly, we had 2 really good standout Most Wanted books so far. It's just like, why did it have to do this? Frankenstein's dog. Again, it's the exact same story that we've seen before. I think it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but also Who's My Mummy from the Horrorland series. And literally, when I tell you, it's the exact same scene, copy and pasted, essentially. We have Kat. She's going to her uncle's. And when she arrives at the place where her uncle's supposed to live, exactly like what happens in Who's My Mummy, or Who's Your Mummy, whatever it's called in Horrorland series. The main character is approached by a stranger, or they like start talking to a stranger, and they say who they are, and they get a warning from that stranger. So in this one, Kat, she sees a woman and asks, can you tell me how to walk to my uncle's house? And the woman says, who's your uncle? She says, oh, I'm sorry, Victor Frankenstein. And then the woman drops her bread. Don't go there, she murmured. Don't go up there. And she vehemently warns her not to go there. And I had major flashbacks to Who's Your Mummy from the Horrorland series, because that's exactly how that one started. I'm sure it was the brother and sister. They come to this place where they're supposed to be staying with their uncle, I think it was in that one too, and they ask for directions to the place, and they're like, don't go there, it's evil. And that's exactly what happens here. She's told that Victor Frankenstein, her uncle, because yes, he's called Victor Frankenstein, is evil. And I don't know why we have this fascination with robots, because it seems, and also Frankenstein's dog, the dog's barely in it. And like, it's so misleading, because this, I'm sure that does not even happen in the book. Like, that's not what the dog looks like. The dog is a little poochy kind of, well, no, the dog's called Poochie. Little thing, I don't know dog types. But it's in for like briefly, and it doesn't look like that because it's cute. So, and yeah, it's robots. It's robots again. It's exactly like Planet of the Lone Gnomes. It's robots. Okay, but also, this turns into Stay Out of the Basement. So, Stay Out of the Basement a freaking again. We've had the Stay Out the Basement twist 25 times in the series so far, I'm pretty sure. And also proof that R.L. Stine is writing as he goes, because, listen to this, Kat wants to go to her uncle's because she wants to vlog him for like a science kind of project. And she says, this spring I had an idea for a project I wanted to do about my Uncle Victor. So I wrote to him and asked if I could come visit for a week. Remember that. So I wrote to him and asked if I could come visit for a week. So all of the crazy stuff starts going on, and she's talking to her friend Robbie about all the crazy stuff that's going on, and she's like terrified. She doesn't know what's going on because, yeah, Victor Frankenstein has other failures, like failed robots that are in his image. So you can see where that's going with the whole Stay Out of the Basement thing. But also, this is what Kat says. I suddenly had a thought, I said. I mean, why was Uncle Victor so eager for me to come here? He's never invited me before. Does he have some kind of plan for me? Does he plan to use me somehow with his army of robots? Again, why was Uncle Victor so eager for me to come here? He's never invited me before. I had an idea for a project I wanted to do about my Uncle Victor, so I wrote to him and asked if I could come visit for a week. It's probably really petty for me, but I'm like, the Goosebumps series at this point is wasting my time. Because if R.L. Stine is not being bothered to keep all of his plans in check, if he's not even bothered to make sure that his story is coherent and makes sense all the way through, it's okay to have some fantastical elements, to be a bit bonkers, this is partly fantasy, but little things like that amongst all of these other stories where he's just copy and pasting all of his other stories, it's infuriating as a reader, and honestly I'm offended. It's like he's insulting the reader, because we're the fools who'll keep paying for these new Goosebumps books when we could just read the old ones because they did it first. It's like I'm getting really angry at this. I love Goosebumps. Don't get me wrong, I love Goosebumps and I idolize R.L. Stine. But this is awful writing. I saw it all the way through. We had Kat do the whole thing where, which one is my actual Uncle Victor? It just pissed me off. It really did. You know what? I'm lowering my rating. I still think it's maybe a little bit more entertaining than Planet of the Lone Gnomes, because that one was just dumb as well. But I'm bumping this down. I'm sorry, but it's just awful. Yeah, I think I can live with that. So this is going to get a 3.00 out of 10. I think what it did alright was atmosphere a little bit, because we do have like Victor Frankenstein's house and it is a little bit atmospheric. But that's probably like the only thing I really like about it. Everything else, I'm telling you, it just made me so angry. He's just not even trying. So why are we bothering? Honestly. Why are we the fools bothering with this story if he isn't bothered to actually write well? And he can write well, I know he can. But what do you call this? I know that's just like one, probably, you might think it's like really nitpicky of me, but it's a constant in the Goosebumps series. How many have I read now? Of the main Goosebumps books, this is the 117th. So this is the 117th Goosebumps book I've read. And you're probably thinking as well, oh, well, you know, 117 books in, he's going to have to recycle ideas. He's been recycling ideas since book 10. I'm telling you. And considering this is book 117, the imagination of so many people and so many like ghostly stories that you can tell to kids can be different. It can be different. Why are we getting the same things? The same things. Honestly, I'm so frustrated. And are we getting another Goosebumps series after Slappy World? Why? Retire. Retire. I beg. Hey, I've just started filming and it's raining again. I love it when it does this, especially when I'm talking about something as spooky as Goosebumps. Spooky my arse. Dr. Maniac will see you now. It's not scary in the slightest. And I have to accept the fact that not every single Goosebumps book, despite it being called Goosebumps, and the fact that we have an introduction in every single Goosebumps Most Wanted book of R.L. Stine showing you a wanted poster of a sinister villain and telling you how terrifying they are, and the story that they have is the most scariest thing you're ever gonna hear. Every single book is false advertisement. But I will say, actually, it's not going to be all negative, because I definitely preferred this more than when we first saw Dr. Maniac. I can't remember what it was called. It was one of the Horrorland books, I'm sure. But in that book, it was just all fake. It was essentially just a boy who is writing Dr. Maniac, and we don't know that it's not a story until R.L. Stine would do one of those 4 cliffhangers halfway through the book, and it's like, oh, that actually didn't really happen, that was just my story. It was the most infuriating thing in my life. So fortunately, this one is all real, so I will give it absolute props for that. But Goosebumps comic stories, not my favourite. Not my favourite. I think the only one I remotely liked was the one in the original Goosebumps series, Attack of the Mutant, I think. And I don't think I gave that one a great rate neither, but there's a lot of nostalgia with that one too, because I remember the TV show episode of it. So, you know, it has that in its favour. I'm not even going to mention the fat phobia in this, because it seems like every single time there's a character who's fat, R.L. Stine has to describe them disgustingly. It's okay to have fat characters, R.L. Stine, you know, and you don't have to describe them as having fat sausage fingers and 3 or 4 chins under their mouth, fat folds of stomach poking out, arms bare and pink like 2 big hams. You don't need to do that every single time a fat character is on the page. You can actually have fat characters and not describe them in this way, you know. And it's funny as well, because I'm still arguing to this day on my original Goosebumps video about the fat phobia. You can have fat people in your Goosebumps books without describing them the way R.L. Stine does it, you know? That's what I'm finding fat phobic about his books. Anyway, sorry, that was just a tangent. I said I was going to go into it, and I went into it. In this one, we follow Rich, and he can't stop sneezing. It's a problem of his. And he goes to Dr. Root, who, again, his chin's folded like pie dough beneath his mouth, to get this shot that will help him stop sneezing, but it doesn't actually work. The twist with Dr. Root is that he is the one who has opened up the door to this comic book world to allow comic book villains to like really thrive and come through to the real world. So it is genuinely real. Like, it's not all a dream, it's not all just a story, it's real, and I really like that. I hated Richard's parents as well, and his brother, infuriating Ernie. Ugh. Ernie stomped on my foot as hard as he could. Why'd you do that? Just felt like it, I guess. He's like worse than the sibling in the Cougar Clock of Doom, from what I can remember. No, actually, she's probably worse. She was probably worse. I really did not like her. But it's the fact that every single time Ernie does something that's really awful to his brother. Like, I know Ernie's like a little bit younger. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The way that his parents treat Rich is just awful. Mom, Dad, Ernie stole my Pop-Tart. He was just being funny, Mom said. Let him have it, Richard. And then the dad says, you eat too many sweets. Okay, you're going to teach your child to think it's okay to snatch and steal off other kids, okay. But the main offender is when Rich gets some really rare comic books from the museum, and he accidentally takes them. He was supposed to take them back, but Ernie snatches them off him and says they're mine now. And Rich goes to his mum Ernie stole my comic books, they're not mine, they belong to the museum. He stole them, make him give them back, make him, make him. His mom says, calm down, Richard, why are you being so mean to your brother? He's just said that these comic books were from the museum. They're rare. And they're not his. So, Mum, why don't you actually do your job as a good parent and mediate instead of just taking the side of Ernie? I hate the Goosebumps parents with a passion. With a passion. Ernie just wants to be like, you, that's so sweet. The parents do end up in a cage by the end of it, and honestly, I was living for that. Because, yeah, the Dr. Maniacs come out, a lot of other comic book villains have come out into the real world. And, like, honestly, there's no horror. There was an attempt at being funny a lot of the times. It wasn't really funny. Well, at least it wasn't in my eyes. It probably would be funny for somebody a lot younger. The repetition of I'm not crazy, I'm a maniac just got under my skin. It was just, and not in a good way. Not in a Goosebumps good way. Dr. Maniac as well apparently wants to work with them to try and get the comic book villains to go back to the museum so that I can send them back. But then, yeah, it turns out that Dr. Root is the one who opened the door and things like that. Like, it was a lot of nonsense that I don't think made a whole lot of sense in the grand scheme of this book. And again, like, the main villain turns out to not be exactly the main villain. It's just, he's not really a villain per se. Nothing really happens to the kids too much. Nothing really happens. Like, the plot is happening around them and they're just reacting to everything. They're just going along with it. They're along for the ride, which I gotta respect in a way. But again, it's just like the kids are so non-existent almost in this book that you could have had this plot without the kids and it would have went the same way. But one thing I did like actually was the ending where Rich decides that he is going to stay in the comic book world because his sneezes are actually powerful and they are kind of like a weapon. So instead of going back to his parents and stuff, and honestly it's a testament to how bad these parents are, the fact that this kid would rather go to the comic book world than face his parents again. I mean, I guess any other kid, really, any kid with their big imaginations would want to live in a comic book world, of course. But like, his home life is so bad that he wants to do it without question. So he ends up going into the comic book world and the door closes forever. So he's going to be there forever and ever. And then he hears his little brother. His little brother is also there. And because they won't age in the comic book world, he's going to be stuck with his brother forever. And I love that. I actually really love that ending. It's a terrible fate for him. And like, he doesn't deserve that because like Rich, whatever you want to call him, he isn't too bad of a person. Like, out of all the other Goosebumps characters, he's not actually that bad. But I just find it hilarious. It's a good ending, okay? I like the twist ending. And I can't think of anything more terrifying. It's probably the scariest part of the book. More terrifying than having to spend a lifetime with a brother you hate. And especially a Goosebumps sibling. Ugh. Can you think of anything worse? So I gave this one a 3.71, which honestly at this point is pretty good. I think that's like a pretty decent rating for a Goosebumps book, and especially one that deals with comic book characters, which I really don't like in Goosebumps. Trying too much to cash in on Marvel, I think. One of my favourite Goosebumps books, probably of all time at this point, now that I've read a whole lot more, is the original Creature Teacher from the Goosebumps Series 2000 series. So I was actually really excited, the fact that we're getting a sort of sequel to that. And yeah, I think it is a sequel. I'm not too sure when it's set, but it's most likely got to be after the original. Because there are some things from the original, like her son, like Mrs. Marg's son, that isn't really explained in this. So Mrs. Marr returns. We have this camp where it's like Winner Island and only winners will prosper, and it's kind of like teaching you how to win, essentially, like not to be a loser. And we follow Tommy, whose parents force him to go there. And Tommy's kind of like a klutz. He's like not really that great at stuff, but they force him to go. And while there, it's revealed that there is a monster called Mrs. Marg who eats the person who is like the worst at stuff. Which is kind of a bit like the first Creature Teacher, where there was that whole list, and whoever is at the bottom of the list is the one who gets eaten by her at the end of term, kind of thing, from what I recall. So we had like the same kind of premise with the Mrs. Marg, and we have it mixed with, I would say, horror camp Jelly Jam, just because that is also set in a camp where people are trying to be amazing or something. It was for that stupid Jelly Jam thing where only the best of the best would be able to clean that monster or something. Oh god, like that was such a weird book, trying to scrub it from memory. But I will say again that I don't even think Mrs. Marr was in this enough to call this a proper Creature Teacher sequel, it pales in comparison to the original. If Mrs. Mogg had been in it a whole lot more, because it just felt like another generic camp storyline for a lot of it, and I'm sick of seeing kids being abused in the Goosebumps series, like honestly, like seeing kids be nasty to one another, seeing adults be nasty to the kids, and parents being awful. Honestly would be the biggest plot twist to have genuinely nice characters with genuinely nice parents. Like having a combination of the two, you'll never get it. You'll never get a Goosebumps book without someone trying to scare someone else or without someone pulling pranks on someone else. You just won't do it. You won't find it. Which ties back into what I say about R.L. Stine not adapting as a writer in the modern day, because he's still writing characters that should belong in the 90s, which sometimes for nostalgia reasons is great. However, this is like book number 119 of the Goosebumps main series, okay? All of the main series, and we're still getting the same characters after 119 books. So I really did not care for a whole ton of this book, because again, it felt like I was rereading like something like Horror Camp Jelly Jam. It just felt like reading another camp story. And then even when we get Mrs. Mogg, like she doesn't really do anything villainous. She doesn't actually like eat anyone. And the worst she does is she tells Tommy that he has to carve out her boogers, or whatever you call them in America. I would just say snot. He would have to like scrape it out of her nose with a spoon or something like that, and he ends up running away anyway, so he doesn't have to do it. So like there's nothing really anything outwardly scary about it, and you know, there is that whole like the new friends he makes. I mean, I would say friends in like the very loose sense. They're not really good characters or good friends. I seem to recall in the original Creature Teacher that the way to take down Mrs. Mogg was to make her laugh. But obviously Tommy doesn't know that. And instead, in this one, he takes her down with a bottle of hot sauce. He squirts it at her, she jumps into the river, and she's gone. She's just gone. So that's how we get rid of this terrifying creature. We get rid of her with a bottle of hot sauce. I mean, it's no better than what happened in the original. Because, like, with the original Creature Teacher, I wasn't the biggest fan of that ending either, making her laugh. And it put her into, like, some kind of coma or hibernation because of it. It was odd. It was odd. But just the whole bottle of hot sauce and she runs away. I'm like, look, she eats people. She eats people. Are we really going to allow a bottle of hot sauce to take down this villain? And again, she didn't even really feel like a villain. Just like all of these Goosebumps Most Wanted books, the villains are not villaining. We end up getting another creature at the end called Mr. Bog or something, maybe a relation. I can't remember. Was it her husband or might not even be related, but just with the same name. Yeah, just the new teacher. I am Mr. Bog. I'll be the teacher till the end of camp, and I don't want any of you to worry. Keep your eyes on the chart, everyone. At the end of camp, I'm going to eat 2 of you. And I'm just like, well, squid him with hot sauce then. Get rid of him. You know, they've done it to one creature, they can do it again. So it's like when we have a ending, like a cliffhanger ending like this, I'm like, will we do know how to overcome these monsters apparently? It would have to work, because you can't just have hot sauce work on one of them and not on the other. Like, the fact that I'm even saying this out loud is scrambling my brain. I can't believe it. It just wasted potential, honestly. Like, this was such wasted potential. This one does have a 4.14 rating. Oh my god, this is like the 3rd best Goosebumps Most Wanted book so far. Oh, that's sad. That's sad, especially considering I didn't really like this one a whole bunch. It feels like it should be lower, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, maybe it is my 3rd favourite. Which is honestly not a good sign. And speaking of wasted potential, I am devastated. I really am, because I don't think we've had clowns so far in Goosebumps, which is honestly a huge misstep on R.L. Stine's part, because clowns can be terrifying, and I am a little bit scared of clowns myself. And what we could have had with A Nightmare on Clown Street, look at that cover, is again the biggest missed opportunity in Goosebumps, because we had a clown murder the clown, which again, scary. Just the name alone is a scary thought, but we do not get that. We don't get it at all. And again, we're presented a villain or villains with the clowns, and yet they turn out to be the heroes of the story? What? And just like a lot of the other ones, it seems like say Planet of the Lone Gnomes. The fact that the Lone Gnomes are like helping them at the end ish, you don't know, it depends on what plot twist you believe. And even Dr. Maniac wasn't even that much of a villain. Just like Murder the Clown. Even any of the clowns could have been so good as villains, and they're just not. they're just not. In this one, we follow Ray, and his uncle is Theo, or Murder the Clown. That's his, like, clown alter ego. And he goes to, like, the clown academy where other clowns are. And there are some silly sounding clowns there, but honestly, that could have blended so well into the horror had we actually gone that route. We just don't. Instead, we just have, like, childish mind games. In fact, I feel like the most villainous person was somebody who, like, you know how we always had that sort of main character and then best friend dynamic kind of thing? In this one, Ray meets someone called Deanna. So she kind of fits that best friend role that is usual in the Goosebumps series. However, she's the one who's been, like, threatening him the whole time. She's the one who, and she says she's been doing it to help him so that he can run away, because apparently there is this clown street where these clowns end up going and they are never heard from again. Which, again, it makes the clowns the victims, not the villains. So Deanna, she, at one point, we didn't know at the time, but she threw a knife at Ray, which fortunately missed him, but could you imagine if it didn't? And she only did that just to scare him off so that he would leave. Like, why don't you just go up to him and tell him? Just say, hey, look, you know, there's something really shady going on here. You need to leave before you disappear forever. Instead of throwing a knife at him? What? Like, the characters are infuriating. The characters are weird. So we end up having Ray try to save his Uncle Theo, because there was this weird moment where it turned out that Murder the Clown wasn't his actual uncle, and his uncle had been taken to Clown Street, so Ray has to go and save him. And they come up with an idea that, oh wait, hang on, there is the main villain called the Frightener, who is scared of clowns. So he's the one who's doing all of this. He's the one who's terrorizing the clowns, and he wants to get rid of them forever, or makes them work so that he can get money off them or whatever. Like, honestly, it's so convoluted. It's just stupid. It just ends up being really stupid. So they think that the way to save all of the clowns and overpower the Frightener is to go to this birthday party, terrify the children, but instead of terrifying them, they end up laughing. So the Frightener comes to see what's going on. I mean, again, he's supposed to be scared of clowns, and yet he just comes to this birthday party while the kids are laughing. He's like, why is everyone laughing? And it's just like, why are you even there? Why are you even there? It just doesn't make sense. And yeah, they end up getting rid of the Frightener because he runs away screaming. That is the book. I like the kind of circusy kind of atmosphere, although it wasn't really, you know, leaned into too heavily. And the idea of Clown Street was kind of good, but it just lacked in execution. Considering the clowns were the victims, not the actual villains. And Murder the Clown, what a mislead. Like, if I could rank all of the Goosebumps covers by most misleading to least misleading, I'm telling you, all of them will be in the most misleading category. So this one gets a 3.29, and I'm just so gutted that Murder the Clown turned out to not be a villain. I do like this cover. In fact, I like most of the Most Wanted covers, not gonna lie. But we had kind of another dud. I'm sorry. This one just felt like Night of the Living Dummy. And I don't know why every single time we have something with a dummy that comes to life, or puppets, as in this one, why there has to be some kind of talent show or some kind of... Like, I mentioned this during Son of Slappy, which in fact this one felt a little bit like Son of Slappy. It's like, RSM was like, you know what, that one worked for me. Let's do it again. And I'm sick of that trope every single time. This one kind of was a little bit different because we started with a prologue of Ben and Jenny. Which actually saying out loud, I just realised is like Ben and Jerry, like the ice cream. I didn't realise that until I said it out loud. Prologue is from 7 years before. The main characters are celebrating their 5th birthday. And they end up getting like terrified by these puppets. And they live with this trauma from being 5 years old to do with these puppets. And that could have been such a good thing to explore had we actually explored that well. So, you know, we fast forward, I think they're 12 now, and they are being bullied and picked on by a couple of people at school, of course, who are doing this talent show with puppets, and our main characters decide that they're going to do the same thing. So they have a friend called Jonathan Sparrow, and he apparently looks like a bird because of his last name, which... I'm pretty sure in Be Careful What You Wish For, we had Samantha Bird, right? And she got picked on for looking like a bird or something, or she would just be called a bird, like Fly Away Samantha or something like that. So like we had the same kind of thing here with Jonathan. Jonathan's dad has the puppets in his attic that turns out to be the puppets from when they were 5, and Ben and Jenny, they end up at first being like a little bit freaked out by them, but then they're like, we need to win this competition, we need to beat these two bullies who I didn't care to remember their names. Like, They all have generic names. They want to beat them so bad that they squish their childhood trauma and never bring it up again. Like, it's never really brought up, really. And you would think that it would. Like, if we had a more skilled writer writing this book, then yeah, maybe we would have got more of an in-depth look into the childhood trauma of, like, puppets when you're young and how that carries into the rest of your life. Even though the main characters had suppressed the memory and kind of forgot about it, they still have those initial feelings and the initial feelings of fear when they see the puppets, but they just don't care. They just want to beat these bullies so badly. And it turns out like the main characters are probably the villains of this story. The way that they act and the way that they treat other people is like so shockingly bad that yeah, I feel like they're worse than the puppets in all honesty. I did like the fact that one of the main characters started getting turned into a puppet. I'm sure that's happened in something else before though. And they conveniently find an address for the like puppet headquarters thing, which so happens to be nearby, and the puppeteer ends up curing Ben from being turned into a puppet. Even though he wants him to be turned into a puppet, he still ends up curing him. Like, it's just like, again, a really convoluted mess by the end of this. I think Stine was like in a bit of a hurry and probably worried about how to wrap it up, so he wasn't sure, so he was like, oh, let's just write anything and see what happens. And it's like odd as well because we do have some moments of mischief, like what happens in the Night of the Living Dummy books, and you think it might be the puppets, but it's actually not. They don't actually come alive until like pretty much the end of it, where they seem to protect the kids from the puppeteer. You know, I don't understand why the puppeteer would cure one of the kids, even though he said they were like bad puppet cells. Like, you still want them to be a puppet, right? You still want them to suffer or whatever you want to do. And yet you're curing him? Like, it doesn't make sense. And then he ends up getting, taken down by the puppets, and the kids run away. So then the kids end up going to the talent show to boo people, to like heckle people, especially the people who bullied them. But when the bullies come out on stage, it turns out that the bullies have been made into puppets. And that is good because, yes, these bullies get their comeuppance, but also the main characters are kind of bullies themselves, and they're kind of not nice people, and, just... I'm kind of sick of like revenge stuff. I'm sick of bully stuff. I'm just sick of it all. So it does turn out that the villains aren't really villains because they ended up helping the main characters. Oh my god. Seriously, like if I counted how many books in the Most Wanted series had a decent villain that acted like a villain, it would be like 2. I think so far maybe 2 books. 3 books. I would say the Haunted Mask one, the Slappy one, and Creature Teacher one, because the other ones just like did not act like villains at all. And even the ones I mentioned, I think the Creature Teacher one is like, it's on thin ice, but she still acted like a villain. Yeah, this one was not great. I gave this one a 3.00 out of 10, and I had high hopes because puppets, I mean, I was hoping it would be different to the dummies, Night of the Living Dummy, but it turned out not. And again, with this one, we have a villain who ends up helping the hero. In fact, not even the main monster of this book. So yeah, here comes the Shaggedy, which is an odd name for a monster, the Shaggedy. I like the swamp setting, but we've already had swamp settings before, namely Werewolf of Fever Swamp, which I think did the atmosphere a lot better. We follow siblings Kelly and Sean. They move to Florida. They meet twins Zeke and Decker, who tell them about the Shaggedy and that the Shaggedy is real. It's a swamp monster. And there was like this really convoluted way of summoning this Shaggedy thing. It was like smearing the blood of a dead animal 50 times and then saying, here comes the Shaggedy 10 times. R.L. Stine has some of the most uninspired ways of summoning creatures. He really does. Characters are, again, quite bad in this, because when Zeke and Decker tell Kelly about where they saw the Shaggedy and stuff, like she doesn't believe them, they decide to push her into the swamp because she doesn't believe them. In all relatability, and I know I'm saying this as an adult, but even if I was a kid, I would just find it so hard to root for anyone, for any child protagonist or even adult, for any character in the Goosebumps series, because they just act so bad. So Kelly decides to get her revenge by summoning the Shaggedy, and she ends up doing this sort of ritual that she's supposed to do, but there's a different monster that is summoned and it starts attacking people, because also actually when you summon the Shaggedy, it gets to do what you want to do, so you can command it, which again I'm sure I've seen before in the Goosebumps series. So yeah, Kelly ends up summoning the monster wrong. We have someone called Ranger Soul, who is he probably is the most decent character in this, honestly. He's like an adult that kind of helps. But I am kind of grasping at straws here when it comes to characters and ones that I like. Big twist in this is that the Shaggedy turns out to be Zeke and Decker. They end up transforming into the Shaggedy to save Kelly's brother. And again, we have the Shaggedy, the villain, the main villain of the story, be the one that helps, be the hero of the story, not the actual villain. What is R.L. Stine trying to do with the Goosebumps Most Wanted series? Is he trying to present these terrifying villains? Or is he trying to subvert expectations by having 90% of the villains turn out to be the heroes of the story? I'm just willing to bet that he didn't even consider that. And he just wanted these twists that nobody would expect. And obviously the twist that no one expects is that the monster is not the monster. So the Shaggedy is not scary in the slightest. In the slightest. It does help. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Nothing else really happens from what I recall. It's just, it's so cut and paste. I had a lot of hope for this one. I did. I heard good things about it too. But yet again, it was a missed opportunity. I need R.L. Stine. I would honestly give a book a really high rating if we just have a villain that sees it all the way to the end as a villain. Not as a last minute hero, not as a villain who's barely in it. I need these Most Wanted books to actually deliver what they're saying on the summary and what R.L. Stine tells you at the very start. R.L. Stine tells the reader, Yarrow Kelly and Sean Anderson, when they moved to the Florida swamps, it didn't take them long to find out if the Shaggedy was real or not. Go ahead, read their story. It isn't pretty. You will soon understand why the Shaggedy is most wanted. But by the end of the book, why are they wanted? Why is the Shaggedy wanted? Because it helps. The Shaggedy is pretty much the hero of the story. So why is the Shaggedy most wanted? So no, R.L. Stine, I do not understand why the Shaggedy is most wanted. I don't understand why any of these villains are most wanted, apart from the Haunted Mask, Slappy, and Mrs. Marg. Are you actually going to start delivering on these most wanted villains, or is this just all one big troll, Mr. Stine? I gave this one 3.14 out of 10. It's honestly not looking good for the Most Wanted series at this point. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of The Wizard of Oz, and I think this is the second Goosebumps book that uses the name The Wizard of Oz. I think it was The Wizard of Ooze in, it's either Horrorland or Hall of Horrors, and we've got The Lizard of Oz, which I do love the name. I think the name's good, clever. I do wish Mr. Stine had done something different and new with this one though. I would have loved it as well actually if maybe he did some kind of Wizard of Oz retelling with reptiles. I feel like that could have been interesting. It would have been way more interesting than what we actually bloody got. In this one we follow Kate, and I don't understand why adults are crap in Goosebumps. I really don't. But we have two idiotic parents of Kate and her brother Freddie. And the mum and the dad make the worst decisions. It almost gets them into poverty. And the dad's always playing pranks on them as well. So yet again, the adults of the Goosebumps series really let it down. Because it just comes across as so silly. More silly than I think the intended target audience is. I feel like some of these Goosebumps books could actually be in the lower age range rather than being in middle grade. I think some of them could actually be lower, and I think this is one of them, considering the fact that nothing really happens in this. We have the parents have this brilliant idea of bringing in illegal lizards from Australia to sell, or to have this museum, this kind of reptilian zoo that they are going to create, and hopefully that will keep them afloat. Honestly, it's just the worst idea in the world. But they do get an egg from Australia, and yeah, Kate essentially has to kind of look after it. The egg gets dropped, a little lizard comes out, bites Kate, and it looks like she's turning into a lizard. And then this is when we get the exact same story again as so many other ones. This is a little bit like maybe My Harriet's Adventure, I think, or is it... Yeah, it is My Harriet's Adventure, isn't it? When they're turning into dogs. It turns out they were dogs all along kind of thing. Well, yeah, Kate's turned into a lizard, and it turns out she's been a lizard all along. Which is exactly the same thing that happened in... What one was it? Was it How I Met My Monster? Where it turns out they were monsters all along. So, we've already got the same plot twist again that we've already had. The ending of this as well is exactly the same as The Girl Who Cried Monster, except they let the person live. So the whole family are lizards, and Kate has somebody who keeps bullying her. I don't know, because we love having bully characters and girl on girl hate in the Goosebumps series. And I know I'm being negative. I know I didn't want to be. I really didn't want to be, especially for the last and main Most Wanted book before the special editions. But, I just have to be honest. I have to be honest here. So yeah, her bully Adele, she's about to reveal to YouTube that Kate is a lizard. And the family invites her over for dinner and they scare her. She ends up running away. So they don't eat her. I mean, at the end, The Girl Who Cried Monster do. They actually eat the librarian, the family. I can't remember. I think they do. Oh, it's left open-ended or left ambiguous to the fact that maybe the family did eat the librarian. In this one, they just scare her and she deletes the video and she leaves. So yeah, that is it. That is literally it. Like, there was nothing going forward. There was literally no plot, really. It wasn't scary in the slightest. This lizard thing on the front cover as well, it feels misleading too. Not a whole lot, because I imagine this is how they look in their lizard form. But once again, it's just... it just wasn't good. It just wasn't good. I'm trying to see a lot of silver linings in these books, trying to pick something that's really good from it, but honestly, characters were awful, there was no plot, the logic wasn't really there, and I just didn't enjoy it that much. So this one is getting a 1.86 rating out of 10. Honestly, like, one of the worst Goosebumps books I've read, and I just don't think it should be part of the Goosebumps series in general. So now we are into the special edition books, starting off with Zombie Halloween, which the name and the cover sound fantastic, don't they? And the fact that these are just a little bit longer, I think they're around about 40 to 50 pages longer than the average Goosebumps book, it's a detriment. It is a detriment to the book. I feel like these could have benefited so much from being shorter and more concise. Mr. Stine does not need to make his Goosebumps books any longer, because he obviously doesn't have the skill to develop where he's going with these characters and the storylines that he's set up, because instead he decides to do everything other than what you want him to do. I know I'm only the reader, I'm not the writer, but there was just so many missed opportunities with this one, and after reading all of the special editions, I know what I'm talking about, okay? As a reader, I know what I'm talking about. We could have had some special, really atmospheric moments and books from the special editions. Would let down so much. And this started off really well. We do have a prologue, like we did with the Haunted Mask one and the Night of the Puppet People one. Part 1 is set in 1944. And we have a group of kids essentially go to this mansion thing, this really creepy house, and they go into like a tunnel. There are zombies, they try to escape, and it's really good. It's like a really good opening to this, and it is a little bit scary. I love zombies, I love everything to do with zombies. And then we get into the present day. We get into the main story, and honestly it just becomes such a slog to read. I much prefer the moments when we are set in the past, and it's even true for the Haunted Mask one too. I would honestly love it if we had a Goosebumps series, like the entire series, be set in the past, because I just don't think R.L. Stine can do modern day stories or like horror stories for children anymore. I really don't. Like, I know that's probably controversial to say, but I just feel like he would benefit so much from maybe setting a story in the past and keeping it in the past. I think a lot of the times in the Goosebumps Most Wanted series, when we've had a section in the past, it's been the best part of the book. So it's the same for this one. The part 1 was definitely better and stronger than the rest of it. Essentially, we follow Kenny, who is being forced to move in with his grandpa Moore with some of his family, and across the street he sees that there are some neighbours and they are getting like coffins and stuff brought in, and he finds that suspicious. Bear in mind, it's nearly Halloween. It's literally zombie Halloween. So why he finds that suspicious is beyond me. We have a lot of dreams. We have a lot of things that don't actually really happen. And then finally we get to a part where it's like a few days before Halloween. Kenny says his grandfather is being surrounded by zombies and assumes that he might be a zombie as well. We learn more about Mario, who was the protagonist from the like prologue section of it. And like he tries to connect the two together. There are dots to be formed. But honestly, never really helps us to connect them. Like, things just happen. So we have a party in the basement, and there is a trapdoor that was shown in the prologue section, and the trapdoor reveals that there are zombies down there, and they are just not scary. They are just silly, and like they talk to the zombies as if they're like people, which zombies are people. That's the whole point of them. But like they're just like they're not scary. I love zombies so much. I mean, they're one of my most feared creations ever, and it's just not scary, and yet Goosebumps is making it not scary for me. Another thing Goosebumps is making me unafraid of now are haunted houses or like creepy houses, because we have an over-reliance on haunted houses in the special editions part of these as well. The zombies are easily overcome as in like nothing really happens with them. They just convince them that Grandpa Moore is the real Mario from the start, and the zombies are distressed about that because he's gotten so old. So they just leave. They just leave. And that's it. That's fine. And then one of Kenny's friends, Trevor, and his parents come and reveal that they're vampires, which is pretty much like the exact same ending to Why I Quit Zombie School from the Hall of Horror series or Horrorland. And I didn't care. I didn't care at that point. The zombies were pretty much non-existent. I love zombies. I love Halloween. It's a recipe for success. Just the two words alone, like the two buzzwords alone. And yet, R.L. Stine still managed to give us a really generic, boring, scareless book. Saying that though, the atmosphere was probably the best thing about it. So on that front, it does get a 3.43 rating. So not terrible, but I mean still bad, but like not terrible compared to the other Most Wanted books. But just, it had such potential. The best part about Goosebumps is being able to read with my baby. We've never had a Goosebumps book set at Christmas, or at least like one of the main books anyway. There might have been a side hustle of a Goosebumps book that was set during Christmas, but none that I know of. I believe there might have been one that was supposed to happen for Goosebumps Gold, a series that didn't end up happening because of R.L. Stine falling out with Scholastic in the early 2000s. I think there was supposed to be like a Christmassy book then or something, like Happy Holidays from Dead House or something, which I honestly wish we could get. I feel like that could have been such a good story. Way better than whatever this turned out to be, honestly. I was going in with such like high expectations because we haven't had a book set during Christmas. I was like, oh, finally, we're being original. We're being original. All you have to do is change up the setting, change up the season, and I'm in high spirits. If R.L. Stine can do anything right, it's to kill my spirit. And this one we follow Kate, and she is wanting to get this part in a play at school, a Christmassy haunted ghost story play that her teacher has written himself. And actually we also had a prologue section, which again was a pretty good section. It was set in 1882, and there were a couple of kids called Abe and Ned and Flora, and Flora ends up falling down a well at the house and she can't get back up, and then we go into the present day. So like that was a good setup to the story, because I thought that was actually kind of like scary, and you know, like a child falling down a well and not being able to get back up, like that could genuinely happen, so it's kind of terrifying. So yeah, back to the present day. The teacher wants them to rehearse this play thing in this haunted house, which obviously belongs to, well, was where the whole Flora falling down the well thing happened. So again, we have that haunted house setting, which again, I usually do love, and yet R.L. Stine has managed to make it very boring. There were too many sections dedicated to this play. I just wanted to stop reading and just go straight to the end because it was starting to pay me off. Because these books are longer, because of how much attention R.L. Stine pays on the wrong things. Like, we did not need to see more of this play. We just needed more. You know, I would have loved more of the family and the story, the background of it, Flora in all of that. But I decided not to do that. I will say though that I did like Kata's character. She is able to see ghosts, and she's referred to as the ghost girl because of that. And at this haunted house, she's able to see the ghosts there. And Abe and Ned want Kate to stay there and fill in for Flora, like replace Flora. And the MO of the villains of the story is exactly the same as so many other ones. Like in the Haunted Mask one, one of the villains wanted company. Even Zombie Halloween, the zombies wanted the person to stay with them. And I'm sure it happens again in like the next couple of books that I'm going to mention. Like the MO of the villain is just generally usually the same. Oh, I just want company. I just want to kill you or hurt you so badly because I'm lonely. Like that seems to be the running theme for a lot of these villain MOs. So I wasn't really the biggest fan of that, but I did quite like the scenes with Abe and Ned, especially since they hold Kate captive to replace Flora. It's actually kind of sinister in a way. I mean, it did remind me of in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when Sally is being held captive by Leatherface's family. It was a little bit reminiscent of that, but like in a really silly way. I mean, I do wish it was more scary, but it is a children's series, I guess. But there were definitely ways to make it less farcical than how it came out, because there could have been a genuine scare there. So I did quite like the whole trying to get Kate to replace Flora thing. Kate does end up saving Flora from the well and reunites the ghost, and it's all fine and well until Kate goes home and Flora decides she doesn't want to be with her ghost family. She wants to be with Kate. So yeah, that's the ending. And Just again, like so many missed opportunities. I would have loved it if we had have carried on with like the Christmas theme and really hammed that up more than what we actually got. Also, I just found the ghost stories to not be as gripping as it was from the very beginning. With the length of this book, it did drag and drag and drag. We focused on the stupid play for so much of it too that I just again, so much missed opportunity. I say that about every single Goosebumps book. So I gave this one a 3.21 out of 10. I just wish R.L. Stine would rewrite everything he's ever written. Not gonna lie. Okay, maybe not everything, but like the majority of his newest stuff, either that or a ghostwriter. I'd honestly welcome a ghostwriter right now. I know for a fact he's not getting ghostwritten because they are genuinely all the same and they have the Stine smell all over them. And again, I do still love R.L. Stine. I can still criticize one of my idols, okay? Talking about missed opportunities and talking about the same characters that we've had in every other book, we have Scott and his friend Amanda. Scott's usually bullied at school because that happens in every single Goosebumps book too. We have a 9-year-old sibling who also scares Scott silly because that happens in every Goosebumps book too. And this one is pretty much exactly the same as You Can't Scare Me and Are You Terrified Yet? So it's essentially just a revenge story on bullies and trying to scare the bullies because they've been getting scared. And by doing so, it always undermines the main character and makes them come out looking awful. There wasn't even one of those R.L. Stine things at the start. There wasn't even a prologue, which I was loving the prologues to begin with, and now they're on even here, and I'm just like, why? They were some of the best parts. So there wasn't even an R.L. Stine introduction, like, oh, this is the villain. There wasn't any of that, because really there isn't kind of a villain. I mean, there kind of is. I love the cover again. I love the cover. And this is set during Halloween time again. And I feel like R.L. Stine, too, wanted to capitalize on the Haunted Mask because he knows that's probably the only story now that he can do well. And so we have like this death mask thing, which is honestly kind of creepy. I went to York a few weeks back and there were these death masks on the wall in York that really freaked me out and I didn't know what they were at the time. So I kind of like that. That did add like some atmosphere to it. But this death mask thing, if you put it on, it's like very hard to get off. And there is this like twist where this woman called Lillian appears and she was freed when the mask was taken out of like this chest thing that they found it in. And now she wants them to be with her forever. Again, like we have that lonely villain trope MO thing. During all of this as well, Scott has been trying to scare the bullies in the haunted house. He thought, oh, I'll scare them silly at this haunted house. I'll set up traps and stuff like that. It's a mess. It's a mess. It's exactly the same as other ones. And it's not scary because it's just people trying to pull pranks on one another. And that's my least favorite Goosebumps recurring trope. What did I say my least favorite Goosebumps trope was? It's when it's fake. Like if the whole thing's fake, I hate it. If the whole thing's pranks, I hate it. And that's pretty much all this was. Yes, we had this moment with Lillian and the death mask. It's easily overcome because they just put the death mask on Lillian. So it's fine. We do end with Scott going home and his sister seems to be, well, might be Lillian because she has a similar tooth. Yeah, the gleam of the gold tooth in front of her mouth kind of indicates that now the sister is taken over by Lillian. 2.14. 2.14. It's just so boring. So boring. The length of it made it worse. Just look at the cover though. The cover's awesome. The cover is awesome. The covers are always awesome. It's just every time the story lets it down. I don't think I have anything good to say about this one. It just, maybe a little bit of atmosphere with the Halloween setting, but again, I can't really say that too much because nearly every single story now is set during Halloween, so. Again, look at this cover. Look at how gorgeous, amazing, spooky, and amazing this cover is. This was kind of like Son of Slappy Part 2 in a way, because we have a main character called Sammy, who is just being mind controlled by a ghost. He's just being mind controlled by a ghost. He does silly things. He dances on the stage when the mayor's doing a speech. He does jumping jacks and cartwheels and like, this is not scary. Again, like, it's not scary. It's just a ghost telling the main character to do stupid things in front of other people, and like, it's embarrassing. Yes, it's for a child as well. It would be embarrassing to do all of these things in front of people and you had no control over doing it. That is a a scary-ish thought, but we've already had the mind control thing happen in the series. Again, when you look at that cover, you think, oh, this is going to be such a scary, scary story. But Sammy ends up going to the haunted house where this boy called Benjamin Marple lives. It's called the Marple House. And, well, the boy is dead. The boy's a ghost. He's always been a ghost. So Sammy ends up becoming a ghost with him for a little bit by going through a door and terrorizing one of their friends and doing exactly what was done to him, making him an awful character because he didn't like when that was getting done to him. So he is making, I think her name was Ruben, making Ruben do all of these things and then decides that he doesn't want to be a ghost anymore. So he goes back to the house. He isn't a ghost anymore. He brings the other ghosts with him and they're human now. And that's it. That's pretty much it. There was no plot. There was literally no plot in this one. We just had a boy get controlled by a ghost who isn't really even called the Haunter. He's just Benjamin. Nothing happened. He did cartwheels. He did jumping jacks. That's what the ghost made him do. And that's it. That's the book. That's 175 pages. And that's the story. A ghost forces a boy to do jumping jacks and cartwheels. 1.93 for this one. It had, again, a premise that could have been so good. It had a cover that misleads. There should not be any new stories anymore. And I know one has been announced after the Slappy World series. Slappy World is next. And he's starting up another series. Oh, I don't have to read them, but I do. I don't think I have anything else to say about this, but boring. Boring, boring, boring. So I have all of the ratings for the Goosebumps Most Wanted series. I will rank them from worst to best. But in terms of the overall average rating, the Most Wanted series gets a 3.44 out of 10, which is the lowest rated Goosebumps series so far. There was a moment where I looked like it might beat the whole of horror series for average, but then the last few special edition books just really missed the mark and dragged it down. And just overall, the Most Wanted series had all of the potential and didn't execute very nearly enough as it should have. And the whole premise of it as well, with the villains and the most wanted villains in the Goosebumps series terrorizing people. It is a lie. It's fake news. So let's rank these worst to best. I won't be going through what I think of each of these books as I rank them, so if you've just skipped on this timestamp and you just want to see my ranking, if you want to know anything more about these books, then do use the timestamps below to see more of what I think of them and why I place them where I have. Here is my ranking from worst to best of the Goosebumps Most Wanted series. In at number 15 is The Lizard of Oz with a rating of 1.86. In number 14 is The Haunter with a rating of 1.93. In number 13 is Trick or Trap with a rating of 2.14. In number 12 is Planet of the Lone Gnomes with a rating of 2.86. In number 11 is Frankenstein's Dog with a rating of 2.93. In number 10 is Night of the Puppet People with a rating of 3.00. In number 9 is Here Comes the Shaggedy with a rating of 3.14. In number 8 is The 12 Screams of Christmas with a rating of 3.21. In number 7 is A Nightmare on Clown Street with a rating of 3.29. In number 6 is Zombie Halloween with a rating of 3.43. In number 5 is Dr. Maniac Will See You Now with a rating of 3.71. In number 4 is How I Met My Monster with a rating of 3.86. In number 3 is Creature Teacher The Final Exam with a rating of 4.14. In number 2 is Son of Slappy with a rating of 6.00. And in number 1, my favourite Most Wanted book is Wanted the Haunted Mask with a rating of 6.14. This was the first book in the series and turned out to be the best by far. So that is the entire Goosebumps Most Wanted series, from best at the top there to the worst at the bottom. And honestly, I think maybe 2 of them I liked, and that's the top 2. And even though, like, say 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like, even though they seem quite high up in placement, I don't think any of these were really that good. And it's honestly just a case of which one I prefer just a little bit more over the other, highlighting just how lackluster this entire series was. I would say that these 2 are maybe hidden gems in the Goosebumps series, maybe. So I will be covering the Goosebumps Slappy World series, which will be a vlog that I will put on my channel around September or October, as I know the Slappy World series is ending this year, so it will allow me to get all of the books and cover them in one movie-length vlog just like this one. So be sure to subscribe so you do not miss out on the upcoming Goosebumps Slappy World vlog. And hopefully I will be able to do more Goosebumps content, especially when I've caught up with the entire main series, and I can do some recommendation videos and maybe some specialized videos to do with Goosebumps as well. Not just these really long vlogs, but to actually sit down, give recommendations and talk about the books to read in the Goosebumps series and maybe the ones to avoid, stuff like that. I think that would be really fun to do. But other than that, I think that's it for the video. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave this video a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave all your comments down below. Let me know what you thought of the Goosebumps Most Wanted series. What did you think of the vlog? Do you have a favourite Goosebumps Most Wanted book? Let me know everything down below. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons and my channel members. If you'd like to join my Patreon or my channel membership, then all the links are down in the description box. But yeah, I hope I will see you in the next video. Bye.